One time her grandfather got up at an Agway meeting and he said, he wanted to give a little speech. He said, "What is an Agway member? What is an Agway member?"
Inspirational.
And then he attempted to answer his own question.
And did it work?
Not for me, but I think he was pretty pleased with himself.
To the delight of the crowd?
Yeah.
All right, are you ready for some probing questions, Mr. Entwistle?
I'll try. Ready as I will ever be, I guess.
You can just look right at me. All right, you ready?
Yeah.
Oh, let's see. What am I at here? Talk to me about farming this time of year. Is it sort of a lull? Harvest time, if you will? Is it kind of a lull in the action?
It's post-harvest time, but there's never a lull in the action on a farm.
All right. Talk to me about your early years. What are some of your earliest memories of farming? Have you always been a farmer?
I haven't always been a farmer.
No?
I was born in Utica, New York, and at age 3, my parents moved to Buffalo, where my dad went to school. And after he finished his schooling, we moved to Ilion, lived in the village. He was a school teacher, but always had aspirations to own a farm, so he bought a little place out in the middle of nowhere, about 19, I was probably about 6 years old. And that was my first adventure, or first knowledge of anything on a farm.
What were some of the first things you did on the farm that you remember?
That I remember, well, I was pretty young, but we had access to this farm only from the Frankfurt Gorge, and we had a road that went almost straight up out of the gorge. We got stuck in the mud a few times, had to walk home, which seemed like a long way at the time, but it really wasn't. And my father managed to buy, I think, 1 cow someplace. There was a small barn on this farm. Never did ship any milk. It was just a remote farm that was almost inaccessible. And I had an older brother. He always managed to see that he did most of the work. And I think he and my mother and my father probably milked the cow. We used to put the milk in a pail and drop it down in the well to cool it. We didn't have any running water. It was like going back into the Stone Age.
Let me consult my list here. Speaking of the Stone Age, there you go. Good what about technology? What about the development of technology as you grew on the farm? You didn't have any running water when you started.
We had on this little farm, which wasn't what you'd call a working farm. We didn't have electricity, and we only stayed there in the summertime, because my dad had gotten a job teaching school, so we had to move. We rented a house in Ilion. I think this was in the 30s, and summer we'd be on the farm, and he would go to summer school sometimes to enhance his education, and my 3 brothers and I and my mother were on the farm, and I think he came home weekends. I think that only happened one summer. And a couple years later, he did manage to buy a farm from a farmer that had, not from a farmer, he bought it from the bank. The person that owned it had lost his main barn by fire, and there was quite a bit of acreage. There wasn't any building there to speak of, a house in ill repair, and we moved there and managed to put on a dairy, and I think when we first got them, my mother and father milked the cows by hand, and of course in addition he had that other job, so it was busy. And I think they got a milking machine and started to ship milk. And of course everything was in milk cans then and had to be cooled with water, and he bought ice. We didn't have a mechanical cooler at that time. That was in the early days. And of course, in my lifetime, I've been a huge change in farming. Almost to factory farms today. A lot of them. They're still small, some small family farms, but back when I was a youngster, the farmers around us probably, if a man had 40 cows and used his family for the labor, why, that was a good-sized farm. Now, there aren't too many in Herkimer County, but some of them have increased in size to 100 to 400 cows. And milking parlors, tractor trailers come to pick up the milk. It's a whole different ballgame.
Quite an operation.
Yeah.
What would you say were some of the major acquisitions, I guess, of technology that you can remember that made an immediate difference?
Well, in the 30s, and we only lived about 4 miles outside of the village of Frankfort, south of Frankfort. In the mid to late 30s, there was no electricity that went up the road, and then that was one of the things that the Roosevelt administration did. They brought electricity to the rural areas, and once you have electricity, why, if you can obtain the financing, everything else sort of falls into place. You put in a mechanical milking machine and mechanical coolers, refrigeration units to cool the milk, and the basics are still there. You have cows that have to be milked, but now they have milking machines or milking parlors and bulk tanks. That's quite an innovation. Everything was put in milk cans, 40-quart milk cans, and cooled and taken in trucks to the milk stations usually in the villages. And once the bulk tanks came in, why, the milk was refrigerated and put right in these big tanks on the farm, and the small tankers came at first, and now basically it's mostly tractor trailers that come that probably hold 50 to 60,000 pounds of milk. So it's changed in size. Still a lot of work.
I have a lot of students that are from New York City, from downstate, shall we say. What would you say would be the biggest misconception about this industry, people who are working in this industry?
Misconception, well, I would say one of them is they think farmers are wealthy and well off, which is a real misconception, because if they were well off, there wouldn't be so many of them going out of business and seeking other employment. And the amount of work involved, I think probably most people just don't realize what's involved in 7 days a week, at least a 12-hour day. In the harvest season, it's more like 14 hours. So I think that probably people don't just realize all the work, all the investment you have to make a comfortable living. I had a guy come around one time, and he was buying beef cows, and he said, "How are things? Pretty good, aren't they?" I said, "Yeah, they're pretty good." I said, "How would you like it when you got up this morning if you'd had to get your wife and your kids up and say, 'Come on, we're going on the road buying cows'?" I said, "That's the way it is on a farm. You have to get your family to help you to make a go of it."
You've seen a lot of farms around, even right around here, go under. There's a lot of business fail. To keep your head above water, what would you attribute that to? Especially in all that.
In order to keep your head above water?
Yeah.
Well, Uh, Probably a lot of it comes down to management and being rather conservative about how you go about things. Always have a little reserve there for the tough times that you know are going to come, because they always come in farming. The price fluctuations in this business are sometimes dramatic, and people that purchase goods in the store just don't realize it, because the price there is usually about the same. But just have a little reserve that you can fall back on, and or credit. Keep a line of credit so that your reputation is good. You pay back the money you borrow, and that's about it, just like any business.
What's the toughest part of this job for you?
For me,
Yeah. Or in general, what do you feel is the most difficult thing?
well, I'm an old man now. I don't have any tough parts. My family has made my life easy, but just, I don't know, just have a good attitude and be willing to work. There's no substitute for hard work in any business, and you have to work hard in this business.
Talk about the support of your family.
The support I've gotten from my family?
Just work on the farm with
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, they virtually run the farm, and I think you can't be, if you have family help, you can't be an autocrat. I've always said there's more than one right way to do things, and you give people the responsibility to do it and let them do it their way, and things usually work out pretty well that way, and they have a feeling of accomplishment that they have contributed their own ideas to the problem.
What would you have done different? A loaded question, I know.
What would I have done different? No, there were a lot of things that hindsight is always 20/20, but I don't have any regrets, or I don't look back and say I wish I'd had a bigger family.
Let's one more, right?
Right.
Just one big over the line of one.
Say, Ma, looks like we're going to need some more help.
Why do you think farming is important?
Well, I think it's important because people like to eat, and there has to be someone that's willing to go out there and work to produce the food. And I don't think any nation or any country can survive on an empty stomach. You have to, and that's where we're blessed in this country. We've had an abundance of food for as long as I can remember. So that's why I think it's important.
What was it like in the 30s?
Well,
how long now was your father still teaching during that time, or was it more or less a full-time farm at that time?
No, my father taught till in a school system till 1940. And then, of course, World War II came along, and he worked as he taught a defense school nights, where he taught people that didn't go in the service how to run these lathes and all the machines that are present in the factories. And I think he taught that school for a couple years. I'm going to say maybe from 3 in the afternoon till midnight. He worked on the farm in the morning. Burned himself out, really. And then during the war years, he worked at the Savage Arms. He was a production supervisor at one of the, where I think they employed 10,000 people there in that factory at that time. Yeah, I think he was a nighttime production supervisor. So he was always trying to do 2 jobs. Until, beg your pardon?
The farm was always there too.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we didn't farm on a big scale, but we probably had 50 cows, raised some replacement heifers. And we had the haying to do in the summer and the corn. And it wasn't a particularly productive farm because the land wasn't that great, but he was always busy. We were.
Some rough times.
Well, no, they weren't rough times. He had.
I just want to hear the car story and the bar story.
Well.
What's your favorite part about this lifestyle?
I love farming. I think it's a great place to raise a family. I have been fortunate enough to have my family, a good wife, and been surrounded by my family. It's really been enjoyable. It's been a lot of work, but I sort of like to work, and it's been a great life.
You think you'll ever stop working?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That day they sound taps. I hope to die with my boots on, but I don't know about that. We're getting pretty long in the tooth now. Yeah.
Any closing comments? What do you want people to remember about Robert Entwistle?
Hey, he tried. That's all. The stupid jerk tried.
Well, that's all I got. Fantastic. You don't have any last-minute stories you want to add?
I don't. I don't want to embellish it too much.
All right. Very good. Very good. See, that wasn't so bad, was it?
You didn't watch his life story.